Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. Q&A today comes from Tony. Tony didn't tell me what his qualifications are here. I'm assuming he is going to be something of a therapist here. He says, I have a runner diagnosed with right IT band friction syndrome where he gets pain with running in the lateral knee. We've made some progress, but he's still unable to run much distance without increasing pain. He doesn't have much pain with normal activities. He's got a bit of a varus knee, limited hip IR, pronated foot, weak gluteus medius, but pretty decent dorsiflexion. When we work on these things, he gets better, but we can't seem to make the changes stick. Any ideas? Yes, I do have some ideas. First and foremost, though, let's talk about this little IT band thing. If we go back to 2006, there's a pretty good dissection in the Journal of Anatomy 2006 where it's pretty clear that this IT band friction thing doesn't really exist because the IT band is attached to the femoral condyle. So if we think about IT band on the lateral aspect of the hip here, it's actually attached down here on the condyle, so it can't slide back and forth because it is fixed there. So if you look at the deep element of this, so the lateral intermuscular septum is part of the fascia lata, the IT band is part of the fascia lata, so it's not even an isolated structure in and of itself, it's just it's a thickening of the fascia lata, so it is attached to the condyle. It does have this broad attachment that crosses the knee onto the tibia, so if we look at some motions that it may affect, it would be somewhat resistive of tibial internal rotation, which is going to, I think, play into Tony's question here. But again, let's sort of eliminate this whole friction thing from the model because I don't think it's very useful, number one, and probably doesn't even exist. So what we want to think about then is we want to start to think about how this extremity is oriented and where we are placing load or tension in excess over time, which is probably what's causing the symptoms in the first place. If we think about the description that Tony did, and this is actually a really good description, Tony, when you talk about the knee orientation, the limitation, hip IR, and the foot orientation, it sounds like we're in a very late propulsive strategy on this right side. So chances are this runner is actually landing in a late propulsive strategy. So we don't have this transition through any of the middle ranges of propulsion where we would normally have relative motion. So we have a lot of things that are probably moving together. And so if we look at the orientation of the knee, we'd have to start up here at the pelvis. And so if the pelvis is getting pushed forward and to the right rather aggressively, we're going to see this kind of an orientation of the pelvis where we have a pelvis that's turning in this direction and so far forward that we're in this later propulsive strategy. So what's going to happen as we would normally land and we move through relative motions at the knee, where we'd have this nice little tibial relationship with the femur, we've got a tibia that's moving into an ER position, and we've got a femur that's most likely following it. That's what's giving that varus appearance of the knee. But that means that we've also had to ER this femur. So we've got ER, we've got an ER at the proximal tibia as well, and so now we've got this big load that's being driven a little bit more laterally, and so that's probably why you're getting that lateral knee symptom to begin with. So from a strategy standpoint, we've got to start thinking about eliminating this left posterior compressive strategy that's pushing us into this. So anything that would start to move us backwards and expanding this left posterior is going to be a useful strategy to all your hip shifting activities. Something in the gym that I love to do is a staggered stance cable chop, which promotes this great left posterior expansion. If you look at yesterday's video on the Camperini deadlift where we were manipulating these phases of propulsion, definitely go there because that's going to help you get that left posterior expansion that you need. Now, having done that, let's say we've eliminated this left posterior strategy. Now we got to start thinking right side because we got to restore the relative motion in this right side. So one of my favorite things to do is crazy simple. I take people out of their shoes, I put their foot on the ground, I get them to feel first and fifth met heads in the center of the heel on the floor, so we get this relatively middle range, middle propulsive position of the foot, and then we start to bring the tibia over the foot in an alignment that would be in line with the middle of the foot. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to teach the runner to bring the tibia over the foot rather than landing in this later propulsive strategy. We want to teach them how to move through this by bringing the tibia forward. So this is not pushing the tibia forward. This is not trying to mobilize the ankle into dorsiflexion. What I want you to think about as a cue is pulling the tibia forward. If we had to pick on a muscle, we would say it's tibialis anterior. What the tibialis anterior is going to do, it's actually going to flex the knee, it's going to dorsiflex the ankle, but it's also going to internally rotate that proximal tibia, which is going to help me start to restore the relative motions, and that's going to trickle down into the foot. So I get this nice little middle range of propulsion where the relative motions occur. I get that back, which is definitely what I want to do. So once I can capture this, and it takes a little bit of practice to really drive this, and you'll get some of that nice little tibialis anterior fatigue. They'll get a little burning in the front of the shin. Now I can go out into the gym and I can start working on some things such as like half kneeling and split stance activities where I get a lot of this middle range relative motion. So I get the IR at the hip, I get the relative motion of the knee, I get tibial internal rotation, and I can start to drive the ankle again through this middle range of propulsion. I'm going to start statically. We're probably going to have a resistance that's going to try to pull us to the right, so we have to create this resistance to hold ourselves through this middle range of propulsion. Now the thing I don't want to do is overdrive the hip internal rotation, because then all I'm going to do is get another pelvic orientation problem that's going to be driven from the left. So I want to think about being square at the pelvis. So I'm going to level the pelvis. I'm going to try to create a bunch of right angles through the hips and across the pelvis. I think I have a video on right lateral knee pain that's already up on YouTube. So look at that as a reinforcement for what I'm talking about. But we're going to start statically so we can capture these middle range positions, and then maintaining that posterior expansion as we're holding these static positions. Once I do that, I want to transition into dynamic activity. So now I want to start to move, again, that tibia over the foot dynamically. I can still maintain my right resistance, so I can again teach myself to guide myself through this middle range of propulsion. But I would start with something like a front foot elevated split squat, so I don't have the massive amount of load on that front foot. But again, I'm going to work on driving that tibia rather aggressively over the foot. I can bring my foot down to the ground then in a regular split stance, and again thinking dynamically of bringing the tibia forward, and then finally elevating the rear foot so I get a little bit more forefoot or front foot load rather. So we're just talking about graded activities here while maintaining the capacity to drive ourselves through this middle range of propulsion. Now a little bit about the foot, because we've been talking about feet for what, 2 weeks now, 3 weeks now. So if I'm in this late phase of propulsion, I also want to think about some ground up concepts. And so I'm landing in a position where I don't have the relative motion in the ankle. And usually when I have this late propulsive foot strategy, it's because the tibia is translating too quickly over the foot. So the easiest way for me to delay this is to get a shoe that has a little bit of an arch in it. And what that's going to do, it's going to reduce the rate at which that tibia can translate. Okay, because a late propulsive foot is very, very useful for high speed, high explosive activities because that's where I produce my highest levels of force. But if I land in that and I'm ER'd and that ER trickles up, then what I can do is I can end up with what we're talking about, which is this lateral knee pain, or I'll end up with a hip thing or a back thing. So again, we got ground up influences, we've got top down influences to address here. But Tony, I think if you look at this as a two-sided problem, and if you look at it as trying to recapture that middle range of propulsive strategies, it'll be much more useful. Have a great day. I will see you guys later.